Hi there, I'm Jessica Jagger, your IT career coach here at Ivy Tech Community College in Central Indiana. Today we're going to be talking about resume troubleshooting, and this is good for anybody that's having trouble with a resume when trying to apply for IT jobs and internships. So we're going to go over the basics today, and that includes your header, your experience, your education and skills, as well as your professional profile. I'd like to start this presentation with a question. What exactly is the purpose of a resume? A lot of us think that it's to get a job, but in all honesty, it's just to land the interview. And with that in mind, you have to ask yourself, what makes a great resume? Well, let me tell you, a great resume is customized. That means that it is specific to the job that you're applying for, as well as the company you're applying to. A great resume also uses relevant keywords. This shows that you are aligned with the company as well as possessing the business skills and technical skills as outlined in the job description. Great resumes are also professional looking. That means absolutely zero misspellings or grammatical errors and absolutely no use of Microsoft Word templates. They also look well formatted with a good use of white space. Let's start simple, your header. Your header is the very first thing that a recruiter or hiring manager sees when looking at your resume. So besides your name being big and bold on that document, here are a couple of other things you might want to consider when creating your header for your resume. First being your mailing address. It's no longer necessary to list your complete mailing address, as no one really sends mail anymore. It also contributes to what's called location biased, and you don't want to be disqualified from a position merely on your zip code. So the best bet is just to put the city and state that you reside in to show that you're local, and you should be all good. Another thing to consider is putting down your LinkedIn URL. And this invites the employer to look at you a little bit more holistically, because typically your LinkedIn profile will also showcase any coursework that you've taken, as well as accolades, additional trainings, all of your education, and all of your work experience, as well as any kind of content you've created. Next, consider the use of a professional email address. You don't want to use anything that can come across as vulgar or quirky because this is a professional document. Lastly, your hyperlinks. Something to consider is if you are printing your resume out to pass out at face-to-face recruiting events like career fairs, you want to make sure that your hyperlinks are disabled just so your format is consistent throughout. Otherwise, make sure that everything that can be hyperlinked is for ease of navigation for the employer. Next, let's talk about your experience. Oftentimes, writing down your experience is the most daunting part of your resume. You'll either be coming into it in one of three stages. The first stage is not even having your history documented. Your second stage is that you have it written down, but you're having a hard time determining which ones matter. And the third stage is having all that information, knowing which experiences matter, and just not knowing how to format it for your resume. So if you're in stage one, you want to start with the basics. And a great way to do that is to use this tool that we love in career development called onetonline.org. This is put together by the Department of Labor Statistics on a federal level, so you know it's legit. And what you can do is research any occupation that you might have had in the past or that you currently hold by putting it into the occupational search bar. And then it will retrieve back a list of common tasks and responsibilities that most people in that occupation do. And it'll be in really concise bullet form, so it's easy to copy and paste. Another thing that you'll want to do is document all these tasks and responsibilities that you've done. And sometimes people use a Word document or a spreadsheet. But what makes this so important is that when you are customizing your resumes, you can go to this document and copy out the things that are relevant to the job description that you're applying for. You'll also want to review any job descriptions, either your current job description or previous job descriptions, just to see if that triggers anything in your brain. Also pay special note to any IT or tech you've done, even if it's informally and not listed anywhere on a job description. Most times us techies get pulled into Tier 1 help desk for the office, and that's important, so you might want to put that in your work history as well. So let's say you're in stage 2, where you have all of your work history documented, but you're having a hard time determining which ones to include into your resume. So here's some tips for you. You'll want to use experience that involves those transferable skills that show that you're a team player, that you have critical thinking skills, that you can communicate well, and that you have time management. Also, don't include any work history that's over 7 years old unless it is IT specific, and because that's relevant, of course. Another thing you might want to consider is using any relevant projects, be that team projects that you do at school, if you are volunteering and using IT in that capacity, or even if you've created a home lab so you can practice and learn more about your craft. So if you're in stage 3, you understand who you are, how your work history applies to IT, but you're having a hard time formatting it specifically for an IT resume. There's multiple ways to format this, but I have 2 that I like to use. The one on the left is your basic format that you've probably seen in several resume templates before, where it lists the company, the position, and 2 to 3 bullet points of your main tasks or responsibilities as it relates to the job description that you're going for. Another format that I really love is the qualifications format. And what this effectively does is it pulls those bullet points away from the individual jobs and places them under a new subcategory called qualifications. And what this does is give the reader the idea that you have these skills innately within you and not attribute it to a specific occupation or job title that you held at another company. This is a good method to use, especially if you have work experience that is unrelated to IT. So you only want to pull out those bullet points that are relevant or show transferable skills. Next, your education. So your education section should include all formal education. We'll assume Ivy Tech is on there as well. You'll also want to consider any technical training you've done on the job, like OSHA certification, as well as online coursework, either through Salesforce, Trailhead, or Pathfinder programs, or Udemy coursework or the like. Another thing to consider is that you'll need to use completion dates or anticipated completion dates for your degrees. No date ranges. Employers want to know when you're going to finish your degree or when you did finish your degree, not how long you were in school. How you format it is quite simple. You want to do it in reverse chronological order, so your most recent education first. And here's a tip. You don't need to put your high school education on your resume because it's a given. If you're in college, you successfully completed a high school diploma. The only exception to that rule is if you were to take courses through a career center at your high school, like C9, that were relevant to IT. You may also want to include your GPA underneath your institution and major and degree, especially if it's 3.0 or higher, as well as any kind of awards like Dean's List or other accolades. Another thing that a lot of students don't really consider but should consider is listing the relevant coursework, especially as it applies to IT. This is quite simple to just write down relevant coursework, Intro to Cybersecurity, Informatics Fundamentals, Networking Fundamentals. These are all things that show the employer what you're currently learning and how you are eager to translate those courses into hands-on learning. So how does this look? Here's a very simple look at the format of an education section. And as you can see, we have the name of the institution, the city, and the anticipated graduation date on that top line. And then directly underneath that is the degree and the major. A common misconception is that you need to bold the institution's name, but the whole use of bolding is to bring attention to the most pertinent information in that block of text. And when you're talking about your education, it does not matter where you got it, it matters what you got. And that means bolding your degree and your major. And you'll also see here that we've listed a GPA as well as Dean's List awards and that relevant coursework below it. If you're like me, you might have forgotten some of the courses that you've taken while at Ivy Tech. And it's super easy to find that out by looking at your transcripts. And you can do that by going to the student dashboard in your My Ivy and looking under your academic profile. Next, your skills. There are 4 categories of skills you might want to consider when writing your resume. Those include your essential skills, which were formerly known as soft skills or business skills. Also skills from past work experiences. Even though they might not seem relevant to IT, many of those skills can be considered transferable. Obviously, you want to list your IT technical skills, but then there's this other category. This may not be IT specific, but if you have a specialization in something, this might help tell your story a little bit better and set you apart as a unique candidate. First, let's look at essential skills. We've talked to a lot of IT professionals over the last couple of years, and by far, these are the top skills that they're looking for in candidates coming from Ivy Tech entering those entry-level IT positions. Number 1 being critical thinking. This is imperative for you as an IT professional to have these vital critical thinking skills, which shows that you know how to identify problems and solutions quite easily and you can take decisive action, while also considering other people's opinions and doing the best thing for the company and the customer. The second essential skill is interpersonal communications. This includes verbal and nonverbal communication, as well as written and visual communication. When we're talking about written communication, you need to be able to write professional emails as well as technical documentation. And then when you're talking to your peers, subordinates, and superiors, you need to be able to participate intelligently to conflict resolution and team building activities. The third essential skill to consider is time management. This means that you know how to meet deadlines, as well as show up to work on time. And people with strong time management skills also have a routine that they follow, and they are consistent in knowing what their priorities are and establishing boundaries. Your fourth essential skill is being a team player. This should be obvious, but you might be surprised. More and more, IT is becoming a team sport as opposed to an individual's game. And team playing means that you adhere to deadlines, that you listen to other people's opinions, that you use those interpersonal communication skills, and you're able to make a product in a team setting with a variety of different backgrounds and personalities. Next, let's talk about your technical skills. Some of the things that you'll want to include in this skill set are any programming languages that you might know, as well as platforms, operating systems, tools, applications, software, and hardware. Another tip is to look directly at the job description for any of those technical skills that you might know and integrate those into your skill set. Also think about your use cases. What technology do you use in your personal life, in your academic life, and in previous work experiences? So how does it look? These are 3 of the formats that I've used for students' resumes in the past that seem to work really well. The first one being the most generic. You'll see that it lists all these skills kind of haphazardly, but really in a structured way. It includes a little bit of those soft skills as well as technical skills. The next format separates things out into categories: technical, computer, and management. These categories can be customizable. So if you come from a logistics background, for example, you might want to put that last column, management, as logistics and list your logistics skills as well, especially if you're trying to pivot into IT within that industry. Lastly, this one is more conducive to the skills within an IT industry. So again, these categories can be customized, but for the purpose of this example, you'll see that we have the certifications, systems, languages, software, databases, but also you could do networking or cybersecurity or information assurance as well. The sky's the limit. Next, your professional profile. So a concise and powerful professional profile consists of 3 to 5 sentences that answer the following questions. Who are you? What do you offer? What do you want? Another way of approaching this task is to think of yourself as a product and using some marketing basics. Ask yourself, what are you selling? Hint, the product's you. Who is your target audience? The consumer in this case is the hiring manager for the company that you're applying for. Thirdly, what is your end goal? Think about how this job will help you professionally, but at the same time, how can you benefit the company that you're applying for? And as a student, this is a really great opportunity for you to tell a story about who you want to be when you grow up. So first things first, let's talk about who you are. And finding the right adjective or word to describe who you are can be really tricky. Luckily for us, there are a ton of great resources online, and I've included some in the description below this video. But first, let's talk about how you identify. Most of us will probably identify as students, but you also might want to consider that you're a lifelong learner or a graduate, a provider, or a specialist, especially if you're pivoting out of an industry into IT. When it comes to adjectives to describe who you are, the number one used adjective of all time is experienced. So when you're considering how to describe yourself, stay away from that word. Think about other adjectives that might not be used that often, and that will set you apart from your competition. Thirdly, you need to ask yourself, what skills do you possess that would matter most to this hiring manager? Guess what? It's all written there in the job description. Here you'll see a real job description from a company here in Indianapolis, Genesis. They're an IT service provider that employs over 900 folks here in the area. As you can see, I've bolded some of these keywords so you can see some consistency throughout this job description. The main thing I want you to see is that there is some repeating trends here. If you look very closely, you'll see that more than once this job description mentions providing resolution. So you can bet that this is what they're looking for first and foremost out of a great candidate, somebody who can provide resolution. So if you're not putting this on your resume, you're not going to get that interview. So now that we've found out a little bit about what should be in your professional summary, let's look at some examples of some bad, better, and best who you are plus what you offer statements. So here's an example of a bad statement. The reason why this is bad is not only is it written in with personal pronouns, there's also some spelling errors, and it also right off the bat talks about what the person wants as opposed to what the person can offer the company. A better attempt at the same sentence would use those great adjectives to explain where the student is coming from and what kind of experience they have and what they can bring to the company. But you'll notice in this example, the word experience is used multiple times, which can kind of sound redundant, especially for somebody that is reading resume after resume and probably seeing this word experienced over and over again. Now let's look at a best example. You'll see here that the word experience does not show up. It has been instead replaced with other adjectives to describe this individual, as well as knowledge and really drilling down into those specific skills that this person holds. Following the same format, let's go ahead and look at some examples of the what you want statement. Let's go ahead and look at the bad example first. This is considered bad because not only is it written in first person and comes across as incredibly informal, it also only speaks to what the candidate wants out of the position and doesn't offer any of that skill set that would benefit the company overall. It's not considered in good taste to talk about your monetary motivation. You'll want to tie your want statement to the company's values and missions, as well as the outcomes outlined in the job description, and leave the salary discussions for much later. Now let's look at a better example. This one is much more formal and outlines exactly what the candidate is looking for. They also vaguely touch upon the skill sets that they would be bringing to the position, as well as the outcome goal of growing those skill sets. However, it still is very neutral, kind of generic, and can be used across the board, and it doesn't speak specifically to the company or the job that the person is applying for. So the best example not only shows the employer that the student wants the opportunity to engage with industry professionals, but also showcases those skills and a specific end goal of wanting to refine data destruction skills necessary for a great career in cybersecurity. So let's go ahead and put it all together. Once you combine those three statements together, the who you are, the what you offer, and the what you want, you'll see that it formulates a great, concise 3 to 5 sentence story about what you're looking for in particular and what you can offer that company. So remember, the goal of the resume is to not get the job, but to land the interview for that job. And the way to do that is to make sure that your professional summary is as concise as possible. Get rid of all unnecessary fluff words like really or exponentially or anything like that, and don't repeat yourself. If you have those skill sets listed under your skill section, don't repeat it in your professional summary. You should be using 3 to 5 well-formulated sentences. In some cases, those can even be bullet points. You want to include your best and most relevant skill set in your professional summary and leave all the other skills in your skill section. You want to include those soft and technical skills that are listed first and foremost in the job description. Did you spell check and did you check for grammar errors? If you did, do it again. If you did it twice, do it a third time. Give it to your family, give it to your friends, give it to me to make sure that everything is error-free. And last but not least, as a student, You can really use this professional profile to tell your story. You have a little bit more wiggle room to talk about your future goals and what you aspire to be. So don't hold back about where you see yourself in 5 years. If you want to be a premier cybersecurity professional, write that. A lot of employers are willing to invest in you if they know exactly what you want to do with your life and your career. Here are some quick tips for a clean looking resume. 1, you don't want to use Microsoft Word templates. Unless you're a visual communication student, a well-written, low-designed document is perfect. And if you are a visual communication student, you need to be designing your own resume. It's the great platform to showcase your creative and design skills. While most say that one page is a definitive link for a resume, some hiring managers would much prefer to see all your relevant information on that document, even if it goes over that one-page limit. The only thing you need to remember is that all the information on your resume needs to be relevant to the job that you're applying for, and if it does spill over to a second page, make sure that it's at least halfway full. Next, use easy-to-read fonts like Times New Roman or Arial. This is for readability purposes and to ensure that your fonts are recognized over multiple platforms. Keep your font size consistent as well. Your regular font size should be between 11 and 12 points. If you go smaller than that, it'll be hard to read, and if you go much larger than that, it'll look clownish. Your header should be significantly bigger than the body of your text, so go between 18 and 24 points as well. Another thing to remember is that consistency in format is key. So if you're using bold in your headings, you need to make sure that that bold is happening in every heading throughout your document. If you're using 12-point font for your block text, you want to make sure that that is consistent as well throughout your document. Remember not to use personal pronouns. I, me, mine, we have no place in your resume. It's still considered unprofessional to use those in a resume specifically, but feel free to use them in your LinkedIn profile or your cover letter. Again, and I can't stress this enough, make sure that you spell and grammar check. Even one small misspelling or lack of a grammar check can be the difference between you getting an interview or not. And finally, never include references upon request on this document. This is a given that you have references, so have them on a different piece of paper and only provide it if it is asked for by the hiring manager. I'm going to close out the session with a real quick tip on how to customize your LinkedIn profile URL so it's easily readable on your document. So usually when you create a profile, you get this URL that's by default, very hard to read, full of random numbers and letters. To make it easier to read and type, what you'll want to do is go to your profile page on LinkedIn. Up in the right-hand corner, there will be a sentence that says edit public profile and URL. Once you click on that, you'll be able to click the pin, and then you can customize the URL. And hot tip, this is also the place where you can customize the viewability of your profile as well. So that's it for now. Take care and let me know if you have any questions. You can always email me at jjagger@ivytech.edu. Take care.